This podcast is brought to you by Reynolds and Reynolds. There are three waves of AI transforming our industry. Explore what they are, where AI technology is headed, and what these emerging innovations mean for automotive retailers at rayray.com/AI-waves for more info.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Wednesday, June 24th, 2026. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. Today on the show, Honda is bringing the Element back as a hybrid. An industry group says California could see vehicle sales halt as soon as next week. And NHTSA is taking another look at Tesla's driver assist tech after a deadly crash. Plus, Kearney partner Kushal Fernandes on why the DRAM chip shortage squeezing automakers is unlike anything the industry has seen before.
There isn't consumer demand that is driving memory demand. It is an infrastructure build out that is driven by very well capitalized AI companies who are in effect in an arms race.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Honda is bringing back the Element, this time as a hybrid. The automaker plans to begin production of the revived Element crossover at its Ohio plant in the second quarter of 2029. It's targeting nearly 100,000 sales in its first full year. That's according to people with knowledge of the plan who spoke with us at Automotive News. Slotting between the HR-V and CR-V, the boxy utility vehicle is expected to take aim at Ford Bronco Sport buyers. We'll have more on this story in a minute with our own Urvash Kakaria. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation is warning that automakers may halt new and used vehicle sales in California as soon as July 1st. That's unless the state delays a vehicle tracking law tied to domestic violence protections. The Alliance represents GM, Toyota, Hyundai, and most other automakers. It says some elements of the 2024 law are impossible to comply with this year, including in-vehicle technology changes that require extensive engineering across multiple makes, models, and model years. California accounts for roughly 10% of all U.S. auto sales. And federal regulators are once again taking a closer look at Tesla's driver assist technology. NHTSA has opened a special crash investigation into a June 19th incident near Houston, where a Tesla Model 3 slammed into a brick home at high speed, killing a woman inside. The Harris County Sheriff's Office says the driver reported using a driver assist system at the time. But Tesla's head of AI said in a post on X that the system wasn't engaged without providing evidence. And those are today's headlines. You can find more details on all those stories at autonews.com. Joining me now to talk more about the revived Honda Element is our own Urvash Kakaria, Atlanta Bureau Chief here at Automotive News, who broke the story for us. Urvash, welcome back to Daily Drive.
Hi, Kel. Thanks for having me back.
All right, Urvash. So the Honda Element had a cult following, but it wasn't a big volume driver. Why is that?
Yeah, so the Element was a niche model, and like many niche models, it had this core base of enthusiasts, but the number of enthusiasts wasn't very large. It didn't really have broad appeal, and the reason for that primarily was, even though it technically had four doors, it was really a two-door vehicle because of its clamshell rear doors. So it basically, the two rear doors opened up suicide style. And so that kind of made for an awkward door configuration. The rear seat access was cumbersome, so it was less practical for families, which obviously are the biggest buyers of vehicles. So, while its boxy design, the upright styling, the sort of the utilitarian approach with the washable floors, the removable rear seats, all those things were very practical, and it kind of made it a great car for younger buyers. It didn't really have the broad appeal. Also, the pricing was to some extent, even though it was targeted at a youth audience, the pricing was not very low. So really, the affordability was an issue. And interestingly, according to some folks I've spoken with, some dealers who used to sell the original Element, they said that even though the target audience was younger buyers, they got a lot of interest from older people people in wheelchairs, people with mobility issues, because they loved those clamshell rear doors. There was no B pillar. So for them, it was easier for them to get in and out of the car. The second seat was also removable. So it led to a lot of cargo, which allowed people to put their wheelchairs, for example. And in the rear, the vehicle had a cargo bed, which again allowed for a ramp to be placed, and that allowed easier access to sort of roll down a wheelchair, for the lack of a better term.
Now, Urvash, how does Honda more successfully target the youth market with the Revival and differentiate from the CRV?
Yeah, so for Honda and for the Element to succeed, Honda really must develop this vehicle to be a true four-door vehicle with easy rear access, while retaining the boxy upright styling and the strong utility that made it special. The other thing they have to do is get the pricing in line. It cannot be much more than the CRV. So this is positioned between the HRV and the CRV. Ideally, this vehicle should be priced under 30,000, but it's more likely going to be between 30 to 35,000, given sort of the competitive pricing or the premium that a brand like Honda typically commands. Most importantly, it needs to keep doing what it did well, but then it also needs to be more accessible to more people with a rearranged, door design, for one. And then they also have to create sufficient differentiation between the CRV. Essentially, they're the same car. They'll be sharing the same platform as the CRV. The Element will be, but the body cladding needs to be distinct enough so that there's less cannibalization.
Perfect. Urvash, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Coming up, Kearney partner Kushal Fernandes on why the AI arms race is driving a chip shortage that automakers can't simply spin their way out of. That's next on Daily Drive.
3 waves of AI are transforming our industry as we know it today. Hear from AJ McGowan, Vice President of Research and Development at Reynolds & Reynolds, on all 3 waves of AI in automotive, where we're heading, and what the latest cutting-edge innovations mean for automotive retailers.
So I want you to picture what it would be like on that same Tuesday morning that we talked about earlier, with a full agentic infrastructure in place. Your service manager wouldn't start the day by reading reports. Ray hands them 3 ROs that need attention and tells them why. Your sales manager wouldn't spot check calls. Ray already routed the ones that mattered. The GM doesn't reconstruct yesterday. Ray reconstructed it overnight and gave them a summary. And your controller doesn't have to pull the deal level analysis every Friday. Ray runs it on Thursday and flags anything that's worth a conversation. Decisions can get made earlier in the day with better information by fewer people. And that's what the agentic wave actually feels like in your store. It feels and sounds a little bit like science fiction, but at the end of the day, it's not. It's just a faster Tuesday.
If you're interested in exploring how AI can improve operations at your dealership, visit rayray.com/AI-waves. That's rayray.com/AI-waves.
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. Yesterday on the show, we talked about the DRAM chip shortage hitting automakers. Prices are up roughly 450% in just 4 months, with GM, Ford, and Honda each reporting hundreds of millions in losses. Today, we go deeper. Kearney just released a new report on the shortage, and the firm's conclusion is striking. This isn't the typical boom and bust cycle the chip industry has seen before. It's a structural reallocation of supply driven by AI companies in an arms race for computing power. It says relief is still years away. Our own Molly Boygan sat down with Kearney partner Kushal Fernandes to break it all down. Here's a piece of that conversation.
Kushal Fernandes, a partner at Kearney. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Molly. Great to be here.
So Kearney just released this new report about the memory chip shortage and specifically a shortage for DRAM. I wonder if you can speak to one of the findings in the report, which is that you all said that this shortage is a structural reallocation of supply. It's not like other shortages that have happened in the past in this space. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So the memory industry over the last 2 decades has been, and even longer, has been characterized by a classic boom and bust cycle, where prices go up and then they fall dramatically due to excess capacity in the market. Now, this time is different for three reasons. Number one is those cycles in the past have been driven by consumer demand, which is not really uh, growth but pull forward of demand. So we saw this most recently during COVID, where people were working from home, and if you needed equipment or you were in the market anyway for a new device, you pull that forward. And so therefore there was this rise up in demand, and suddenly obviously then there were shortages, prices go up and so on. And that cycle repeats itself, right? And soon after that, because that demand has been satisfied, volumes go down and so on. This time it's different because it isn't consumer demand that is driving memory demand. It is an infrastructure build out that is part of a mega capex cycle driven by very well capitalized AI companies, who are in effect in an arms race and are spending to build up infrastructure as quickly as possible. And memory is a key part of that. So the nature of the demand being sustained this time is fundamentally different from any of the previous cycles that we've seen. And it is also being concentrated in the hands of a few big companies. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is the type of memory that is being consumed by these AI companies is more wafer intensive. So effectively, the capacity that is available goes down because of the type of memory that is being bought by these AI companies. It's called HBM, which is high bandwidth memory. And essentially, for the same 1 GB of HBM, you need 3 to 4 times the wafers as you would for 1 GB of conventional DRAM. And so it's a double negative in A, they're demanding a lot of it, and B, they're demanding something that just consumes more wafers. So this is the second reason. The third reason is that, shifting over to the supply sides, this is a heavily concentrated market. There are only three suppliers of DRAM in the world that are globally accepted, and those are two Korean companies, Samsung and SK Hynix, and one American company, Micron. And they've been remarkably disciplined in how they are handling this situation in terms of adding capacity. You would expect to have seen a flurry of announcements on new capacity additions, but that has not been to the same extent as we did during the COVID shortage. We saw the CHIPS Act and things like that. Granted, as to how much of that has actually materialized, but there were at least announcements. There is some of that. There is capacity coming online, but none of that is in the near term. It's 2 years out. And obviously, the timeline to establish new capacity and new clean rooms and tool them up and get them to mass production is also 2 to 3 years. So this isn't something that is going to happen in the near term. So for those reasons, three reasons, it is a structural change. It's a reallocation of where the memory is going to buyers who were previously maybe 10%, 15% of the market to now being half of the market. And on the other side, we're seeing a different, having, been burnt several times in the past. Suppliers are not eager to add capacity. And I actually recognize that this is not a short-term cycle. This is a longer-term cycle, and they are making handsome margins.
Wouldn't you think then, because they're understanding that this is not a regular boom and bust cycle, that actually it's sort of a different situation from the boom and bust during COVID, the investment in fab capacity during COVID and then the subsequent oversupply. I guess I wonder if that's the right decision by those manufacturers to avoid bringing significant capacity online, given that the cycle is different this time.
Yes and no. I think there are a few differences between the memory supply chain and other semiconductor logic supply chain. For one thing, the fabless foundry model and contract manufacturing model that exists in other parts of semiconductor do not exist in memory. All of the memory players are vertically integrated. So not only do they develop the technology, they also manufacture it. And so, there's a capital barrier, but there's also a learning curve, IP technology barrier that also exists here. So the threat of new entrants is not non-existent, and obviously as margins and cash flows in the business improve, it certainly attracts other players. And there are players in China that are that have some capability and certainly will look at the current financial environment as a good place to make investments in. So I think there's certainly that one angle of it is not easy for new entrants to come in. There's high barriers to entry, or as people use the word today, a pretty significant moat for memory companies. The second element to it is, I think there is certainly, while they do believe that this is going to be durable, you don't want to get into a market share race with your other, because that's what happens is if I expand supply aggressively, the other two players will respond, and you could easily then find yourself in a situation of overcapacity, and it's a lose-lose. So I think they're being careful about how much they add, being a little more controlled for the, from their point of view, the greater good of all three of them. And I think you could just as easily be in a situation, I mean, it's not that people are unsure of the durability of this cycle, but there are obviously complications in the way the AI industry is structured with a lot of the circularity of investments and so on. So obviously that is the singular thing that is sustaining this, but is it and is likely to continue for years given the capex outlays, but it is not immune to risk or shocks. So I think they're being cautious in how they think about capacity additions.
That makes sense. The report also outlines it's expected that the shortage is basically going to get worse before it gets better. And then you outlined a constrained and a surplus scenario. And there were a couple of sort of wild card factors that could shift the timing or could drive things in one direction or the other. Can you talk about those wild card factors? What are they and how will they influence supply?
Yeah, I mean, outside of the overall, durability, as I said, of the cycle and of all of the capex and just the economy as a whole, the two factors are one, model efficiency. So as AI models continue to get better and they can then use less memory, algorithms are designed to kind of, and again, necessity is the mother of all invention, and you can be sure that given the constraints that are on the hardware side and hardware supply chain today, one way to address them is to look at how efficiently we can use this resource, right? And so as models continue to get efficient, there will be, potentially reduced memory requirements, but that could be counterbalanced by the fact that as things get more efficient, they also get consumed more in terms of total demand or uptake or volume. So that's one wildcard factor. The second, I mean, I would say it's a bit of the DeepSeek moment that happened, a year and a half ago, where folks suddenly saw that you could have great performance without using NVIDIA GPUs or a lot of NVIDIA GPUs at least. The second one would be the China factor. There are two players in China that are memory suppliers. They are not globally accepted for several factors or several reasons, but the Chinese market is large enough for them to serve. The margins today are on memory are attractive enough for them to invest in R&D and capability. And while they may not necessarily be at the leading edge of memory, there's enough of a market for them to serve in China in automotive products, industrial products, consumer electronic products that do not necessarily need bleeding edge technology, where there's a lot of volume. And so them getting more pervasive in China and them potentially having access to more international markets could alleviate the situation simply by adding capacity to the market.
Kearney partner Kushal Fernandes spoke with our own Molly Boygan. That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer, as well as our own Urvash Kakaria for his reporting for today's podcast. You can get the latest news on the DRAM chip shortage, the Honda Element revival, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back tomorrow for a conversation with Automotive News Asia editor Hans Greimel about the unrest at Nissan's shareholder meeting this week.
There was a lot to complain about, and they weren't shy in letting the management know about it.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.